Gulliver's Travels, a simplified summary. Chapter 1. A Strange Land. Lemuel Gulliver, a ship's surgeon, set sail on a long journey. During the voyage, a violent storm hit, and the ship was tossed about by giant waves. Eventually, the ship broke apart, and Gulliver was thrown into the sea. He swam to the nearest shore, exhausted, and fell asleep. When Gulliver woke up, he found himself tied to the ground with tiny ropes. He couldn't move. Looking around, he saw tiny people, no more than 6 inches tall, surrounding him. These people were called Lilliputians, and the land was Lilliput. Chapter 2. Life in Lilliput. The Lilliputians took Gulliver to their emperor. At first, they were afraid of him, but Gulliver tried to show he meant no harm. They fed him and gave him a place to stay, though everything was too small for him. He helped them in return by doing various tasks that required his great size and strength. Gulliver learned about the Lilliputians' strange customs and their ongoing war with a neighboring country called Blefuscu. The war had started over a disagreement about the correct way to break an egg, at the big end or the small end. Gulliver was amazed by how serious they were about such a trivial matter. Chapter 3. Gulliver helps the Lilliputians. The Lilliputians asked Gulliver to help them in their war against Blefuscu. Gulliver agreed and managed to capture the entire fleet of Blefuscu's ships by tying them together and dragging them back to Lilliput. The emperor was delighted and wanted to enslave the people of Blefuscu, but Gulliver refused, saying it was wrong to treat people that way. The emperor grew angry with Gulliver, and soon enemies in the Lilliputian court plotted against him. They accused him of treason and planned to blind him as punishment. Gulliver, realizing he was no longer safe, escaped to Blefuscu, where he found a large boat and used it to return to England. Chapter 4. The Land of Giants. Gulliver didn't stay home long. He soon set out on another voyage, which also ended in disaster. This time he found himself in a land called Brobdingnag, where everything was gigantic. The people there were as tall as a church steeple, and Gulliver was as small to them as the Lilliputians had been to him. A farmer found Gulliver and took him to the queen, who kept him as a sort of pet. Life in Brobdingnag was hard for Gulliver because everything was so large. He was often in danger of being hurt by the giant animals and people around him. The king of Brobdingnag was a wise ruler, and Gulliver often talked to him about the customs and politics of England. The king was horrified by the wars and corruption in Europe and thought that Gulliver's people must be odious little vermin. Chapter 5. Escape from Brobdingnag. One day, while on a trip with the royal family, a giant bird swooped down and grabbed the box in which Gulliver was being carried. The bird dropped the box into the sea, where it floated until Gulliver was rescued by a passing ship. He returned to England, where he once again tried to settle down. Chapter 6. The Flying Island. But Gulliver's wanderlust got the better of him, and he set out on another voyage. This time he was taken to a strange land where people lived on a flying island called Laputa. The Laputans were obsessed with mathematics and music, but they were also very impractical. They spent all their time on useless projects and neglected important things like farming and building. Gulliver was not impressed by the Laputans, so he left the flying island and traveled to nearby lands, including a place where people tried to extract sunlight from cucumbers and another where they tried to turn human excrement into food. Chapter 7. The Land of the Houyhnhnms. On his final voyage, Gulliver was shipwrecked on an island inhabited by intelligent horses called Houyhnhnms. The Houyhnhnms lived in a peaceful, rational society without lies, wars, or money. However, they also had a low opinion of humans, who they called Yahoos. The Yahoos on this island were wild, filthy creatures that looked like humans but behaved like animals. Gulliver came to admire the Houyhnhnms and was ashamed of his own humanity. He tried to live like them, but the Houyhnhnms eventually decided that he was too dangerous to keep in their society because he was still a Yahoo at heart. They ordered him to leave. Chapter 8. Return to England. Gulliver built a small boat and sailed away from the island. He was eventually rescued by a ship and taken back to England. However, Gulliver was no longer the same man. He had grown to despise human beings, seeing them as Yahoos, and preferred the company of horses. He spent the rest of his life avoiding people as much as possible, living quietly and reflecting on the strange lands he had visited.